On July 16th, 2017, on my family trip through Colorado, we stayed in Durango and of course visited the Durango and Silverton Railroad. This historic depot is still used by DSNG and was originally built in 1882. They did have their Bachmann set on display in the gift shop. I managed to get a picture of the season's departure board. This is coach number 334, the Hermosa. Car 319 Needleton probably dates from the 1920s or 30s since it's a vestibule coach. Concession car 566 is an old mail car which was briefly painted green back in 2010. In between the gondolas, which were converted in the 1950s, is coach 311, one of the oldest coaches on the Durango and Silverton. It was also repainted green in around 2010. In the yards is diesel number 1, a GE 50-tonner. I had no idea the Durango and Silverton had diesels until I saw this in person. They also had 3 other similar diesels by this time. They also acquired in 2017 Diesel 1203 from the Georgetown Loop Railroad. And here's another converted gondola car, number 414. On the path to the Roundhouse Museum, there are 4 boxcars that have been converted into workshops. Car 3614 is the reservations office. You can also see inside the roundhouse where the locomotives are kept. I believe this tender is from 476 since that's the locomotive they were currently working on. 476 is a class K28-282 that was built in 1923 by Alco. 476 last ran in 2007 and was on display in the roundhouse for a bit. Here you can see a really shiny tender axle. It was freshly machined compared to the one in front of it. Also in the roundhouse is number 42, a Baldwin K36-282 that was built in 1925. Outside of the roundhouse is Caboose 505, built in 1881. Across the turntable are a couple of the first class cars. Now we move inside the museum section of the roundhouse. Here's a selection of track tools between the track. One of the engines in the roundhouse is Rio Grande Southern number 42. This Baldwin 280 was built in 1887 for the DRGW and was sold to the Rio Grande Southern in 1916. This engine was in Golden, Colorado between 1958 and 1983. The Durango and Silverton has always kept this locomotive in the museum. There are some times where the tender has been removed from the roundhouse to get a better view of the cab. Sister Engine 41 does survive at the Knott's Berry Farm in California and is operational. I also saw in the museum a picture of 476 in a Wild West livery. It complements the Bumblebee livery of Engine 473. On a baggage cart is a large-scale model of the Durango Depot. One of the trains is this ambulance car known as the Casey Jones. And the real Engine 478 is right behind this model. And here's the real 478, a K28-282. It was built in 1923 by Alco. This locomotive last steamed in 2016. All of the steam locomotives operating on the Durango and Silverton are outside frame locomotives, meaning their frames are outside the wheels. Rio Grande Southern 42 is an inside frame locomotive. You can go up on 478's footplate and see the cab, but you can't really go inside of it. Also in the roundhouse is Caboose number 500, which was built in 1881. Caboose 500 has been in the museum since 2013. This is a picture of it when the Durango and Silverton used it in service. weren't allowed to sit in the cupola. According to this lettering, it was restored by the Durango and Silverton in 1993. This was the drumhead on the back of the caboose. There was also car B7, the General Palmer, in the museum part of the roundhouse. It was built in about 1880. If I remember correctly, you could only see it from 478's cab. I believe this coupler was sitting on top of the caboose. It's a hybrid between the knuckle coupler and Lincoln pin coupler. In the corner of the museum is Denver and Rio Grande Western sleeper car number 460. This unrestored car is a tourist/immigrant class. I was even able to find this picture of the interior. Next to car 460 is this Union Pacific baggage car. I don't think you could go inside of it. Some other notable artifacts in the museum is this horse buggy and 1904 Model T. There's also this massive HO scale model railroad. Too many trains running around on the layout when I visited, so I didn't take many pictures. This small crossbuck from Scale Products Company did catch my attention though. There are also a whole bunch of other neat static models on display. I really like this mining town one. There was this Lego model of a Durango and Silverton locomotive and coach, and this fabulous wood model of Rio Grande Southern 42. There are also models of all of the Durango and Silverton's first-class parlor cars, complete with accurate interiors. These models run on HO scale track, which is a standard gauge model. Narrow gauge HO scale runs on N scale track. See too many vertical boiler locomotives associated with logging roads. There's a lot going on in this model. There's also this model-powered Texaco train new in the box on a tripod. And above some of the display cases are some pre-war Lionel and some American Flyer trains. This model of a Southern Pacific cab Ford with a caboose, a business car in Stevenson's Rocket, and this large-scale toy-like thing. And now we go back outside to see the steam trains arrive. This was the 6 o'clock arrival with 486 at the lead.
Okay, hold my other ear.
Number 486 is a Baldwin K-36 Class 282, built in 1925. 486 was on display at the Royal Gorge between 1965 and 1990. And this is the 6:30 arrival, led by 41. This is probably one of my favorite shots I ever filmed. On the way back to my hotel, I saw this long line of boxcars and this locomotive on display. Tomahawk and Western Number 1, Emma Sweeney. As you can tell by this Baldwin Locomotive Works builder's plate, this isn't a real locomotive. This is a wooden replica of Rio Grande Southern 20. The real Rio Grande Southern 20 was currently undergoing restoration and is now returned to steam at the Colorado Railroad Museum. This wooden replica was built for the 1950 movie A Ticket to Tomahawk. It was also used as the Hooterville Cannonball in Petticoat Junction. This wooden engine was on display in California until 2011. In 2014, this beautiful replica was restored to its original condition. This livery reminds me of an amusement park locomotive. On July 17, 2017 at about 6, I managed to catch another train outside of Durango. I think this is engine 482, judging by the whistle. Part of me thinks it came off of a Japanese National Railways locomotive. The next day we headed north via Silverton. I was a bit surprised to see modern crossing installation on this narrow gauge tourist railroad. I also noticed this maintenance of way yard with some ballast hoppers. And now we are in Silverton. There's quite a few interesting pieces of equipment on display around here. Starting with this maintenance of way car 04432. This flanger snowplow OT. I believe this car is also used to spread ballast. And here's diesel number 11, a 98-ton GE US Steel locomotive. There are quite a few freight cars parked around the depot, including boxcar 3543. Next to the depot, there's this V-shaped minecart. It's quite a small one too, about as tall as me and about as wide as me. This 1882 depot is now a museum and doesn't serve any passenger trains. The museum opens when the first train reaches Silverton and closes when the last train leaves Silverton. I stopped by before the first train reached there. There is also this information board about other railroads in the Silverton area. Also around Silverton, I discovered a few standard gauge cabooses. Kinda like this structure between these two. There was this old shed made out of a boxcar. These vehicles were also quite interesting. These things were behind the San Juan County Museum. I think the museum also has a Silverton Northern bobber caboose, which I didn't get to see. But I was still pretty impressed with this mining equipment. Probably my favorite piece here is this diesel locomotive. I don't know much about it, but I'd like to see something like this run again. This cool SG means Sunnyside Gold. All of the equipment on display have these unusual couplers. There's also this Simcoe loader, which does not have those unusual horn hook couplers. There is also this flat car used for transporting explosives. And this thing in between the two is a 10-ton 1959 ore car. In this image you can kind of see how the coupler is connected. And there's also this much smaller scooper. There's also this battery electric locomotive, which is more common in mining operations, and this other mine car. And there is also this mine car to another corner of the museum. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.